Strawberry Fields Forever, Take 7, remix from 4-track, Take 6.
G'day everyone, I hope you're doing well. It's me, Maitreya, coming back at you. Episode 5. We got Wil Anderson today. It's going to be a fucking ripper. It's an awesome chat. Wil Anderson is a hero of mine. Someone who I quite literally had his pictures up on my wall. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to the bloke behind the desk at Cotton On. I was buying some sunnies, 2 for 15, how it is. And end up getting chatting. Man has added my Facebook and is going to listen to the potty. So here's your little prezi, mate. Hope you're listening. Because I don't really mind who is or isn't listening. I'm doing this for me, firstly, but it's a whole lot of fun just to create a community and get around it all. And I thank everyone for their continued support. I've been spoiled with some positive messages and beautiful shares and shout outs, and it's given me a chance to think about what I want out of this podcast and what this podcast can bring that maybe other podcasts or assets in life can't bring to a lot of people. That's my aim's authenticity above all. That I've stumbled upon reflection. And I've decided that on this project, Questions with Maitreya Edwards, I'm never going to take a single cent from it, no matter the circumstances. Although if the circumstances change in the future and I need money, I'll change the conversation then. But I want to be very explicit that I'm not going to have any ads on this. I'm not gonna take any money off the top or off the bottom or anywhere. No sense for me. I'm learning too much to let money get in the way of a product that, like Wil and I discussed today, should be unapologetically to your tastes. I love you all, and I hope you're happy listening. If you want to catch anything that Wil Anderson's doing, I mean, firstly, just fucking punch his name into Google. The guy's everywhere. In terms of podcasting, Wilosophy is my personal favourite. He did one with Tim Minchin, a fellow who I've been looking a lot at during isolation. He does amazing music clips and talks really well about life. So I highly recommend you check out that episode. He's also got Two Guys One Cup, which is an AFL podcast, TOFOP and FOFOP. Give him a check out, show him some love. Tell him I sent you, because that'd be a pretty cool twist. I actually got him a viewer. Could you imagine that? Anyway, in saying that, I love you all, and shine on, you crazy diamonds. By the name of the podcast, Maitreya, and today I have a very special guest. And in the workings of his own podcast, I will ask my guest today, who are you?
Hello, Maitreya. My name is Wil Anderson, and I am a professional stand-up comedian, although at the moment I am an unemployed professional stand-up comedian. So I don't know if that devalues, like, I've always introduced myself as a stand-up comedian first and foremost. I do some other things, I've presented television shows, and I've, made radio and podcasts and written books and all those sort of things that I've done over the journey. But I've always said quite confidently, I'm a stand-up comedian, because first and foremost, that's what I do. That's my anchor. And right now, stand-up comedy isn't a job. So I guess, I don't know, I work in an industry that no longer exists, at least to each other.
That's brilliant. And it's almost the first April you've had off in 24 years?
So this would have been my 25th year doing a brand new show at the Melbourne Comedy Festival. So quarter of my life. I mean, probably longer than you've been alive, right? How old are you?
I'm 19.
Yeah, so you missed the first 6 years of my shows. So good excuse not to have come to those ones.
You're right.
Good anyway, so you didn't miss out on too much.
I picked the right era.
Yeah, but some of the ones when you were saying, 0 to 10, some of those ones were quite good, but not appropriate 0 to 10. But yes, the fact that I've been doing that same thing for 25 years, which, I'm 46, I think, 46 years old. I've forgotten how old I am, but I think I'm 46 years old. And which means that I've been doing stand-up comedy for more than half of my life. And I've been every April at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival for more than half of my life, and for more years than you've been actually on this planet. That's what I've been doing every single April. So the idea that suddenly this year I mean, somebody did say to me that the only way that I was going to have a year off the comedy festival was a global pandemic, and they were right. So
It was actually factually very accurate.
I could have taken a year off at any stage, but it took. I decided the festival itself had to have a year off for me to have a year off.
I'm bigger than this thing itself. If you're gonna fucking quit it, I'll quit it. But if not, I'm there. I love that, Wil Anderson. My first question to you is: at what age have you, or do you feel happiest?
Well, that's a good question. I would say that. I mean, I'm happy now. I mean, I think that I'm happy now because, look, the last couple of years have been a period of time for me anyway, where I was re-evaluating, as you constantly do in your life, what makes you happy and what doesn't make you happy. And over your life, you make a series of guesses into going, I guess if I do this thing, this will, fill this bucket, tick this box in terms of my happiness. And then sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you enter into things and you think, oh, what I'm losing out of this is not, doesn't kind of balance out what I'm gaining out of this. So I was doing a bit of a life readjustment anyway, trying to be a little less busy, trying to be away from home a little less, trying to concentrate more on what it is that I was most passionate about. Because it feels ironic to say this in the middle of a, 6-month unemployment period. But the truth of it is that I'm busy even in unemployment. I've got podcasts, I've got an entire imaginary radio station. And then by the time you do, something like this, or you a guest appearance on a little Dum Dum Club or somebody else's podcast, you might often be doing the equivalent of 6 or 7 shows a week and be unemployed. This is your unemployed. So you're still kind of busy.
Definitely.
But I love it. The reason I do that stuff is because I love it, not because there's a financial reward. And what that right now is proving more than ever is that you continue to make the art that you love to make, even if you're not getting paid to make that art. But there are some other things you do in your life that you purely do only because somebody is paying you to do those things. And you've got to sometimes do things to pay your bills. But what I would like to do more than anything is to be able to do the things that I love doing the most, that I get the most artistic and comedic sort of satisfaction out of, and turn those into the things that pay my bills enough that I can just concentrate on doing those things and not necessarily be doing a whole bunch of other things at the same time. So I had been working towards that a bit in the last sort of year and a half, 2 years anyway. And then we've had just a massive pause button pushed on pretty much all of those things, which has given me a space and time to step back and say, when this finishes, when we come out the other end of this, what do I want my world to look like? What do I want my life to look like? What do I want to be putting all my creative energies into? And for me, I think that I am at my best when I have the time to think about why I am doing things. And often when you're really busy, the first thing that goes away is not your capacity to do those things, but your capacity to think about why am I doing these things, right? You just go from one thing to the next thing. Right now, I've got nothing but time to think about why I want to do things and what the purpose of those things are and where they fit into my life. And I tend to find that these are times where I feel very happy because I love nothing more than digging around in my life and my mind to think about, if every day you're getting up and thinking, what is important to me? What makes me happy? What is it that I feel passionate about? What is it that I don't feel passionate about? What is it that I have learned that I can live without in my life? And what is it that I've learned that I can't live without in my life? And then trying to take those things back into the world when we go back to normal.
It's an ongoing puzzle, isn't it? I think a lot of people, whether they like it or not, have the chance to reflect for a lot of people for the first time in a long time, because not everyone actively seeks the why in what they do and what they love. I wanted to ask the first question on happiness because you are responsible for my favorite sound in the world, which is my mother's unbridled laugh. She has this cackle. I hope one day, Mother's Day was yesterday, I got her a very nice Paul Kelly record. Oh, I didn't. Her boyfriend did, but I'm taking a bit of credit. That's off the topic. But because I got a record player, so he just bought me a record, and Mum can listen to it when she wants. But my favourite sound in the world is her laugh, and we got to go to Dave O'Neill's Comedy Funhouse last year, and you were performing on stage, and when she has a couple of drinks and she gets a bit energetic, she gets really chatty. Like she'll refer to you as Wil only. She'll be like, "Oh, go on, Wil, tell a joke, Wil." And when I see Mum in that space, it makes me so happy because she doesn't care who else is watching. She just wants to enjoy this moment, and being able to have that opportunity to be there with her in her space is the best. So I can't thank you enough for giving my mother that and giving me my favourite sound in the world.
Well, it's a lovely story for you to tell, and I will tell you why it's a particularly lovely story for you to tell, because that would be a nice story anyway. Like that would be fun to hear. But that gig that you're referring to, I was really unwell that night. I remember it specifically. I did it during the comedy festival last year, and I had done that night, and on the way there, I'd started feeling really, really ill. So I was backstage, not even sure if I was going to be able to go on stage that night. And so I was kind of sitting in the corner of the stage and the whole time doing that thing of trying to be in the show, but at the same time, like, you know, when you're just doing that thing of going, just don't vomit in front of people. You're doing that double thing of trying to control how you feel personally versus trying to, you know, do something at the same time. So the fact that somebody got a lot of joy out of that night, because I don't actually remember anything that was said that night, anything that went on. All I remember is how sick I felt and how the minute I got on stage, like, I think Dave still might have some money for me because I think he was going to pay me for that gig, but I literally walked off the stage, out the back, and like got in the car and went home because I was feeling so sick that night.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I remember, because I've looked up to you. I shouldn't say this on the podcast because it takes away the hierarchy element, but I've looked up to you for a long time. So I remember you standing there on the side of stage. I remember you, and you were wobbling. You're wobbling a bit, and I thought, oh, he might be like. I thought you were quite fucked up. I thought like, oh, he's really drunk or something.
I was quite fucked up. I felt. I wasn't particularly drunk. I would have drinks at my show like I always do, but no, it was. You're right. I was literally like the whole time, and the wobbling, I think, was that thing where you just like, if I just kind of rock myself, everything will be fine. You can get through this. There's a lot of funny people up here at the same time. Get through this. Just don't vomit on stage. Everything.
And it doesn't help when you have my mum heckling, "Go on, Wil, tell us a joke, Wil." I also feel bad now because after the show, we were leaving and I saw you and I came up to you. I'm like, "Wil, love your work," and just went in, out, and saw you. But now I realise I was in the zone of potentially being vomited on. So I'm glad I got in and out quickly.
Well, the good news is for people following the story, precisely, I did make it home and did not vomit, but I do remember just feeling terrible that evening.
Brilliant. My second question to you is, who has been your biggest influence?
Who has been my biggest influence? I think comedically it was Billy Connolly, and not somebody that I know, although I did have the opportunity to meet him, which was amazing. But when I was 17, I'd grown up on Billy Connolly records. You've got your record player now as a modern young person reclaiming the past, but they were just records back then, and before they went to cassettes. And there wasn't a lot of comedy available in those days. It wasn't like you could go on YouTube or Netflix and see things. So really, the only comedy that went around was Billy Connolly, Bill Cosby. Yeah, that did not go well. The 12th Man and Rodney Roode. Who would have thought out of those four that Bill Cosby would be the one that we looked down on the most? But that was it. And maybe Bob Newhart, Monty Python, a few other things, but there wasn't a lot available. And Billy Connolly was the one that I absolutely loved. And when I was 17, as I was about to go off to university to study journalism, and because I grew up in the country and I love stand-up comedy, but I never imagined that I would be a stand-up comedian. Like, the first person that I met who worked in stand-up comedy was me. Like
Yeah.
there was,
Yeah.
it wasn't like in Denison where there's 250 people. There was a vibrant stand-up comedy community, and it wasn't even back in those days where like the Comedy Festival Roadshow or things like that might come to country towns. So for us to see comedy, we had to go to the city, and my mum took me to see Billy Connolly for my 17th birthday, and I remember sitting in the room that night, seeing him on stage at Hamer Hall. 3,000 people there would have been there, and, aged 10 to, probably mid 70s, 80s. He had such a huge, span of audience and crowds who loved him. And just like him telling these stories and swearing and seeming to lose his place and then, remember where it was and weave it all together at the end. For me, it was like seeing magic on stage. I couldn't get over how pure a form of entertainment it seemed. Like I loved live music, I loved bands, I loved plays, all that sort of stuff. Like I'd been in musicals with my mum; she was a big musical fan, so I had seen lavish stage productions. But for me, the idea that this man with no set, he had a stool and a bottle of water and a microphone stand and his mind—that was the entire show. The entire show was this guy is interesting enough that all of us will pay $100 and sit here together in this room together just to see what he has to say about stuff. And I just thought that was the most amazing, intoxicating, pure form of entertainment. Like, you talk about that sort of idea of farm to table food. This was, brain to mouth to audience art. The shortest that you could possibly be between the artist's, creation and the audience experience that creation was like happening there on stage in that moment. And I loved everything about it. And I remember sitting in the room that night just thinking to myself, not knowing what the thought meant at the time, only, now that I have done what I've done for so long, look back on this and go, well, that was it. But at the time, I remember sitting in the room and for the first time in my entire life, just sort of sitting there going, well, what is this? This is amazing. I would love to be around this. And then I went off to university and studied journalism and, ended up, being quite good at that. Like, graduated first in my course, worked in the Canberra Press Gallery, but hated it. Absolutely hated it. It was, I just like, and I couldn't understand like that thing that a lot of people go through at that age, which is like, what is going to give me happiness in my life? And I thought it was going to be being good at something, right? That's what you get told.
Yeah, of course.
At university, study, be good at something. And I've got a bit of a runny nose. It's not COVID. It's early.
Don't stress.
But it's okay. We're not in the same space anyway. We were responsible, socially distancing, podcasting, everything's
Look
fine.
at that. Otherwise known as I'm very cheap and I've got a Skype account.
Yeah, well, either way, like, let's put a positive spin on it.
Yeah.
So I'd been at uni for 3 years, and I'd worked in the Canberra Press Gallery for 2. And I remember getting to the end of my university degree and having a few job offers, and I'd put out a few job offers to other newspapers as well. And I was talking to my boss, Tom Burton, who, again, if you want to answer this question about big influences and mentors in your life. I've never seen him again since this, I don't think. I've ever run into him again since this conversation, but it was one of the most pivotal conversations in my entire life because I just said to him, I said, I don't know where to go. I don't feel like I want to go to any of these jobs, and a lot of them were good job offers. I said, I'm not happy. This isn't making me happy. And this was a guy who'd spent 2 years of his life mentoring me. I was the kid in the office whose only reason to be there was to get coffees and wine and check the boxes and be mentored in journalism. And he put a lot of faith into me and a lot of his own time and extra time into me. And so I felt like going into this meeting that he was probably the person that had the right to be pissed off the most, that I just didn't want to do it. And I remember having a conversation with him, and he just said, no, that's fine. He said something along the lines of, you've applied yourself to this, and this is why you've been good at this. Just find something that you love, something that makes you happy, and apply yourself to that the same way you applied yourself to this. Thought it was, great advice. Very, very well considered and generous advice, I thought. And so then I had to think about what that thing was. And I really did a complete inventory of my life. And there'd been times as a kid I was like, oh, maybe I want to be an actor, but I can't act, and I can't, do voices or impressions or, memorize lines very well, all the things that, actors need to do. And plus acting is boring. I've done little guest things on Friends projects, and it's just, what they say about acting is hurry up and wait. You just sit around all day to shoot one fucking line. No thanks.
I don't want to cut you off, but on the topic of that, you have the funniest cameo when taken out of context ever, I reckon. It's on Peter Hallier wrote it. It's a date in season. It's like episode 2, and when you take it out of context, it's so bizarre because you walk up, shake Stephen Curry's hand, and say, "Great show, mate. Makes me wish that I was in a wheelchair."
Yeah. Yes, that's right. That's at the SB Hotel. They filmed that, which was the first place I ever did stand-up comedy. And the premise of the episode was that Stephen Curry's character went to, I think they worked in the office with Asher Keddy's character, and they were going on the first date. That was the first day, and it was revealed on the first date that he was doing stand-up comedy. But not only was he doing stand-up comedy, he was pretending to be a chair for stand-up. So funny premise for an episode. And I had that he was on, and that was my one line.
So I can definitely see in the acting world, you're like, yeah, this is probably it for me. I don't need this as much as I thought I did.
About 5 hours I sat around that day for them to fucking shoot that thing and meet. I normally work for about 70 minutes a night and try to jam about 80 or 90 minutes of ideas into that 70 minutes, and that'll do. Thank you.
But glad it makes me wish I was in a wheelchair.
I had to think about what it is that I wanted to do. And I said, well, when was I last really, really happy? And I went back to that Billy Connolly, gig, and I thought that's where I felt really happy. And I had noticed that even though I hadn't done any performing or anything when I was at university, I still went to comedy. So I would still, if a big act would come into town, I would go and see the big act. I would go to the regular Wednesday night horrible local comedy thing they had at the Private Bin nightclub. I would do those things. And so I kept thinking, well, you love stand-up comedy. Why don't you move to Melbourne, which is the home of the comedy festival and stand-up comedy, and go and see a lot of stand-up comedy and see what happens next. So that was, it's funny. I've met Billy Connolly since, but only literally once for one lunch. But I was at least able to express to him, some gratitude, for the big influence that he had taken in my life. And when he toured for the very last time a couple of years ago now, he played Hamer Hall, the same venue, and I was able to take my mum to see him at Hamer Hall because that was pretty great, and we had much better tickets because it turns out, people will get me some good tickets to Billy Connolly if I ask the right people. But so I guess that's the difference between 17-year-old me and 44-year-old me, or whatever, is that I can get as much better seats to Billy Connolly.
That's what we can take away is get good so you can get pretty fucking good seats.
Yeah.
Brilliant. It's a bit embarrassing. I was told yesterday, shout out to Daniel Tellerady, he was texting me and just asked me and just supporting me with this podcast idea. And I said, oh yeah, I'm doing Wil Anderson tomorrow. And he said, oh, that's amazing. I remember you tried to get work experience with him in year 10. I went, oh, hang on. And I went through the archives and I was at this stage, 16. I'm like, the school wants me to do something. I'm like, fuck it. I'll just try to get a week with Wil Anderson and try to write gags, just try to do something like that. And I tried. I obviously it didn't come out. I ended up working, did Coles for a week, which I want to say I didn't like, but I did like it because I was with a girl I had a crush on. So I just ended up spending a whole week just talking to this really pretty girl. And I remember right at the end, my the coordinator, he's like, oh yeah, you probably don't want to have this job forever. But I kind of look at the girl like, yeah, I know.
If she wants to have this job forever, I'm happy to have this job.
I'm happy to get paid $5 a day to stand next to her. That is fine by me. That or go with Wil Anderson. Either is cool. But
looking back through influences, I don't think, having the opportunity now to talk to you is so cool for me because this is the whole idea of this podcast, is going through my influences, and to be able to have a conversation with you now, where I tried in year 10 and I'm here now, for me it's special too. And I'm really, really glad to hear how comedy shaped your world. Once you started watching stand-up comedy, was it something that you began to practice? How did you practice stand-up comedy?
I met. This will sound like well, anyway, there's no other way that I can tell this story, so I'm just going to say the sentence. Anyway, I was talking to John Cleese, and I was talking to Cleese about stand-up comedy, and he said one of the most amazing things, which was, if you want to learn how to do stand-up comedy, one of the greatest things to do, rather than going learn about the rule of three or learn about setups and punchlines or any of those sort of things that are sort of structural parts of how comedy is made, he said, go and find somebody who makes the sort of comedy that you would like to make. Learn their routine by heart. So it might be Jim Jeffries' gun routine, or it might be Eddie Izzard's, Darth Vader, the canteen on the Death Star, routine, or it might be, Bill Hicks's, UFOs routine. Whatever it is that you love, go away, learn that routine by heart, and then write it down. Because once you know the routine and you know where the laughs are and you know it as a routine, if you then write it down, you'll be able to see the structure of how the comedian put it all together. So don't start with the structure. Start with the full thing, learn it by heart, and then write it down, and you'll see how they actually wrote it. And I think that's a really brilliant piece of advice and a really good way to look at writing. And in a way, I think that's how I learned to do comedy. I wasn't doing that on purpose at the time, but we would memorize these routines from these comedians. And I had a bunch of friends. We would just do. Jim Owen went on the big gig, the first time Jim Owen ever did a big TV performance, and he had this routine about seagulls not having any eyebrows. And as 14, 15-year-old kids, we would just do his voice and recite the routine. And the more that I knew these routines, I knew this Billy Connolly routine about stingrays, box jellyfish, like that. I knew it was 8 minutes of comedy, and I would have been able to do it off by heart. And so I think in learning those things, I started to learn a little bit about how comedy was made and what it was. And then at school, we used to have this house play competition, the school houses, like an athletics thing.
Yeah, sure.
Play competition. And, traditionally, because I think it had to be, each house had 30 minutes or whatever. And so I think it had to be, the plays were always really boring because it's hard to find a good 30-minute play, to do for a bunch of teenagers. So there'd always be these, way too worthy five-handers that were just some sort of, just like, this is terrible. And so I was like, I'm 15 or 16. Nobody's interested in drama part of, the house. So I've just decided, again, I look back on this kid and just go, who the fuck were you, man? Confidence now, but basically in year 10, I've said I'm in charge of the plays. Fuck you, year 11 and 12. I'm in charge of the house plays now. And what I decided I would do is I would audition everybody who wanted to be in the play, because that was the other thing that pissed me off. There might be 20 or 30 people who wanted to be in the play, but because there'd only be 5 parts, no one would ever get a part in the play. So I was like, you know what? If you want to be in the play, I'll audition everybody, and then I'm going to write a 30-minute play where everybody gets to be in it. But obviously the better actors will get more. But if you want to be in it, even if it's just like one line or whatever, I'll write one line in, and thought I'll just specifically tailor make it. So that was my idea. But then I was like, well, how do I write a play? So mostly what it wasn't really a play. It was a bunch of other people's sketches and routines and stuff like that, from television and Monty Python and Elton and all these sort of things that were around, that it had just been essentially rewritten into a narrative. So again, you're just taking, back then it was like literally just taking their joke and changing it to be about something else. Yeah, so right. That it was, so you are just learning by nature how these things are written, how this sketch was written, how this joke was structured. And then, of course, I would try to turn them into a narrative. So I did 2 years in a row. The first one was called Gunfight at the Ozone Corral. It was an environmentally themed Western.
Classic.
And good for bit parts. You know, if someone only can have one line, a Western's a good one for bit parts.
Oh,
And then
definitely.
the next year, the sequel, Murder on the Ozone Express, which was, again, an environmentally themed, but a murder mystery on a train. And again, a good place for just random characters to come in and out. And so our house won those house drama competitions 2 years in a row. And so I think that was probably the prime time where and they were just, they were, a lot of it wasn't original work. It was very much like, as you would say, a DJ mixing other people's work into something original is original work, but it was made of a lot of other people's work in the process. There would have been a lot of samples to clear if I was going to put.
Yeah, so that's brilliant. And so it was just for you, I suppose, through that, because I'm starting to be a primary teacher, and we talk about ways of learning a lot, and it was something that you loved, but it was just incidental throughout the way. And yeah, it's a big old compilation is not a bad way to do it. And at least you know, fuck, I love these jokes, so they're pretty sound. It's pretty sound comedy regardless. You know, it's not, there isn't as much vulnerability in just trying to say a joke and wondering if it'll come off. You know, like, oh, I fucking love these gags. If no one else likes it, I'm still gonna love these gags. So there's not much to lose there, and to show the responsibility and authority is such a great way to learn. I think obviously it paid off pretty well.
Yeah, well, the irony is that I think sometimes when I'm at my worst as an artist, in my comedy career, it's when I'm thinking too much about what the audience wants and not thinking enough about what it is that I like and what I enjoy. Gary Goulman, who's one of the best comedians in the world, always says, write the show you'd like to see yourself. And sometimes you fall into the trap of writing the show that you think the audience expects to see rather than writing the show that is truly the show that you want to write. And I always think that I'm at my best when I'm in the latter category more than the former, but it's not always the case.
Very well put, mate. My next question to you is, Wil Anderson, when was the last time you cried?
Oh, it'd be recently. I'm a big crier. It doesn't take much to get me to cry.
I like that. Yeah, no, I think it's a good thing. I'm not a very good crier. I didn't cry for years, but I'm practicing, and I'm trying to take in, because I think crying's a really cool thing. I really respect crying, because I couldn't do it for ages. I was quite envious of people who could. So that's why there's a big question there. But also, I noticed the other day, the AFL House have taken that question and have done a podcast style thing with a bunch of AFL players. So they would have done it before me, but I was like, fuck, this is my question. Like, even though I think I took the question from Adam Zwar. So it's in the chain, but my ego all of a sudden has been deflected on this question. But anyway, that is enough about me. Wil Anderson, when was the last time you cried?
What would have been the last thing that I cried at? Because that'll help me remember what it is. Because I'm an easy crier, particularly for things that are intentionally meant to make you cry. I'm big on one of those sort of things. Like, if a movie has a trigger point where it's meant to make you cry, then, you know what it is? I know exactly what it is, actually. So there was internet, just a little, little internet clip that went around virally probably 2 or 3 days ago, or at least when I saw it was 2 or 3 days ago. And it was of a little old man who the nursing home staff had noticed went to bed at night hugging a picture of his deceased wife, and so like he would sleep every with this little picture hugging it, and they wanted to get him something. So what they did was they made him sort of a pillow with the picture projected onto the pillow, so that he could actually just hug the pillow and be hugging his wife. So there's a little clip of them giving this pillow to him and his reaction to that, and that made me cry. It's making me almost cry. Just actually,
Thinking about, I got to find this clip because it sounds beautiful. We'll go on to the next one because we don't want to dwell on tears for too long here. What has been your greatest life challenge?
I think that life in itself is a series of challenges, and I think that it really is once you get the point where you accept that. I think there's a point in your life, if you've lived a reasonably privileged, happy, healthy, well looked after life, that you think that you only deserve one challenge at a time, but that's not really how the world works. You know, the people who had their house burnt down during the bushfires didn't get a free pass on coronavirus. It doesn't work like that. They're in a place, they don't have a house, and they also have to deal with all the things that came with, you know, COVID-19. And it's much like that in life. I have osteoarthritis in my hips, which has been a real physical challenge. That's been the biggest thing for me, is that my body has probably let down the ambitions of my brain, you know, and sometimes, you know, the things that I want to do are limited by the capacity of my body to do those things. So in a physical sense, I really think it has just been the day-to-day dealing with chronic pain and the ramifications of chronic pain, and just the major changes to your life, but the impacts that it has on the lives of those who are closest to you as well. Because I think that when you're living with a chronic disease of some kind that, you know, incapacitates you, that limits, you know, the things that you can and can't do, you in a way get used to it because you're living with it every day. But for those who are around it, who are frustrated by, you know, the limits it puts on your life, or the pain they see you in, or the, you know, medication that you're taking in order to deal with any of those sort of things, often have side effects on the people who are closest to you as much as they do on yourself. So I find that hard. I think it's probably the toughest. I mean, I've lost jobs and I've lost friends, and, you know, all these things that everybody has in challenges in life. And, you know, I'm currently unemployed for the first time in 24 years, but so is a lot of the world right now. And I think that in some ways, you know, that's the thing that we've always got to remember. You know, right now it's very obvious that a lot of the world is experiencing the same thing. But the truth of it is that most of the time, 3 million Australians have chronic pain of some kind. So my you know, story is not a unique story by any means. And you often forget that when that person is walking too slow on the footpath, or that person is a little bit too grumpy with you, you know, at the supermarket or whatever it is, you forget often that they might be dealing with a whole bunch of things of their own, and that we should always, you know. So I think that challenges tend to improve you. I do believe, I do subscribe to the idea that, you know, every challenge is an opportunity to learn something. And particularly as a stand-up comedian, I think that you learn the value of failure very quickly. And in fact, I wish I'd learned it a little bit more quickly. It's a bit of advice that I mostly give to young comedians is, don't be afraid of experimenting. Don't be afraid of failing, because it's the failure that teaches you much more than incremental success will, particularly as an artist. And so every time that I've had a major failure in my life, you know, I've tended to try to turn it into something positive, either through my work. I mean, I got, you know, arrested for something that I didn't do on a plane, and you know, that was a pretty traumatic thing in my life, both physically, and I had some PTSD and a whole bunch of other things afterwards. And but you know, I turned it into a show, one of my favorite shows that I've ever done, and I thought it was
brilliant. Yeah,
a lot of people have seen it, a lot of people have enjoyed it. So I tend to try to, in the best that I can, try to look at it, adversity, as problems to be solved and things to learn from and things to overcome.
Yeah, very well put. Because I was going to say, yeah, that Wil Eagle show is probably my favourite one of all of them. So isn't that a beautiful testament to the motto that of something challenging, you can make something great?
Well, it's my dad's favourite show. My dad, I don't think my dad really likes my comedy. That's not a personal. Like, he comes and sees my show every year. I think it's probably the only comedy he's ever watched in his entire life. And so the point being that it's not made for people like him.
Yeah, sure.
And he's not looking to consume it. He's always telling me, I was on the phone to him yesterday, it was Mother's Day, and I was talking to Dad in the background I'm talking to Mum on the phone and Dad's in the background. That's normally how it works. And he's telling me about my friend Mark Howard's podcast, his sport podcast, the Howie Games, and Howie's one of my best friends from high school. And so, you know, grew up in our house as much as any of my friends. And Dad loves his podcast. And of course, never, you know, it doesn't know how to download a podcast. Mum downloads them all onto an iPod, and then
Is
Dad
that
just
beautiful?
listens.
That is so nice.
He's tried my podcast, not for him. They are not for him.
Right.
He loves Howie's podcast.
Son, you
And
tried
so,
your best, but Howie's pretty fucking good over here.
well, I'm glad that Dad's not listening. It's not made for my dad, that's the whole point of it. And it's a bad business model to make comedy for your parents because you're not going to make them pay anyway.
Yeah.
And it's bad comedy to do comedy only for the back of the room because the people laughing at the back of the room aren't going to pay for tickets either. So
yeah,
there are two mistakes you can make. Care too much about what your parents think and care too much about what the back of the room thinks when you're doing your comedy. But he loved that show. He said to me afterwards, he said, I really liked that show. He said it had a story I could follow, not like your usual shit. And so it was worth for that.
Isn't that the epitome of tough love? Not like your usual shit, Will. This one was actually fucking pretty all right. My next question to you is, what change would you like to see in the next year, both within yourself and the world around you?
I mean, lots. Well, in some ways, I think the worst thing that could possibly happen out of what we're going through now, there's this relentless rush to get back to normal. And I understand that because some of what we're going through now is completely uncomfortable. And I understand for those who are, really at the bottom level of this, those who were in jobs that may never return, or those who didn't have jobs in the first place who now will never get a job again because those jobs are not around. And for those who suddenly, the discussions are happening already about winding back the payments, winding back the welfare. I have a real fear that in our rush to return to normal, that we will forget all the important lessons that we just learned. And those who were worse off will become even more worse off. And so both in my art and in the world, I would like us not to rush back to the new normal. I would like to think that we should be learning some lessons out of what is happening to us right now and how we react on a global scale to a massive challenge. Because if the scientists are right, and I don't know, but here's what I subscribe to. We live in a society, the best way that we can, work is to believe experts, right? That's the system we have. Experts aren't always right, but they're more right than people who aren't experts. And so that's the system, right? It would be an efficient system if we had to learn how to do everything ourselves to do something. If I wanted to travel overseas on a plane and I had to learn how to build a plane and then fly a plane, that is an impractical system. We trust that there are other people when we buy that ticket who have thought all that through, and there are regulations in place, and there are scientists and engineers and experts who have worked out how to make a plane fly. So we'll all step on board that plane and sign up to that social contract that that expert knows what they're doing. So when the scientists, the people who are the experts in this, who A, warned about what we're going through right now if we'd listened to them, but B, have been telling us about climate change and the disastrous effects that are coming our way, we firstly need to listen to them more. But second, if they're right, and, I believe that they're probably more likely to be right than wrong, then this was a practice run. What we're going through now, this was training. This is Bruce Wayne in Batman Begins in the prison getting in fight and saying to the other guy, I'm your worst nightmare. No, you're training. That's what this was. COVID-19 was the guy in prison that we were beating up to see if we could become Batman. And so we need to go back into the world and understand that there are going to be people left behind by the technological advancements, and how do we best look after them? How do we have a universal basic income? And it doesn't have to be an actual UBI. Maybe it's a universal basic standard of living. Maybe the public provides the idea that everyone deserves education and health and all these things that are important. But we need a bigger safety net. The safety net needs to be higher, and the net needs to be paid for by those at the top, not those in the middle. And I think that we have to carry that back into the new world. We have to remember as artists, I think, and this is the one that will change me the most, is no one gave a fuck about us, it turns out. Turns out in a real job. Certainly when it weren't an essential industry, well, we were, of course, because what has everybody been doing in lockdown? Consuming art, TV and movies and podcasts and
here we are.
Games. That's, of course, people do care, but they also don't fucking care. They try to make artists play by their rules, right? This is the thing. The one problem with, art becoming corporately successful is that corporations then get to set a bunch of the rules, right? If you're going to do a show on Channel 10, here's 5 things you can't say, or here's some things that'll get edited out if you do this show. And if you're going to do a show on the ABC, here's 20 things that you can and can't say, and you have to say them in a balanced way, and blah, blah, blah. If you want to do this, you can't say this. If you want to do this, you can't say this. Or you said this, and now it's a front page headline on news.com.au, and people are discussing whether you should have been able to say that thing. Well, you know what? That is only valid if you think we're a real thing. You know what? You can't make us play by your rules all the time. And then when shit goes down, going, fuck it, you guys are on your own. It's not a real job. We don't look at it as a real job. It's not a real industry. I know you bring millions and billions of dollars into the economy and create joy and livelihoods for all these people, but fuck you. It's not a job. Well, guess what? Fuck you too then.
Yeah.
Honestly, fuck you too. That is the last time you ever get to say anything about how it is that I do my job, because when shit went down, you didn't think it was a job. Guess what? When Australia was on fire in January, comedians were the fucking first people to put on charity gigs and put
100%.
and my people do the right thing, even if it isn't in their best interest. And so, you know what? You don't get the right to tell us how we do what we do anymore. Fuck you. Fuck you. Exclamation mark at the end. And I hope that when art comes back, because we will, of course, some people, and some people will be hard, but George Carlin always used to say the most glorious thing in the world is that little bit of grass that comes up, between the concrete. They have concreted all over us, and we need to be that little bit of heroic grass just bursting through it. But we need to do it, and we need to be more aggressive about it, and we need to be more fuck you about it, and we need to stop letting these idiots try to control what it is we do with our art. So I think both as a person and hopefully as a world, art does have a real big place to play in how we reshape the ideas of the world and how we reshape what's important. I hope it has more influence than capitalism does, because I fear that's going to actually end up, we're going to return to normal and bring in austerity, and everybody's going to learn absolutely no fucking lessons, and we'll go back to these. A lot of people will be forced back to jobs that they hate from this time where perhaps they spent time with the family they loved, or learned how to cook or play a musical instrument. It's a terrible time, obviously, where, a lot of people have lost their jobs and may never see those jobs come back again. So I think first and foremost, that's where we start. The first thing is to lobby so hard for us to never return to us not having a proper safety net. And then we have to work out how we pay for the safety net.
Yeah, it's almost, we need to kind of embrace our inner wallflower and the grass through the pavement, exactly like you said. And God, I hope we can learn from this, and even day-to-day experiences that we took for granted. And it's such a cliche to say we took stuff for granted, but we do all the time. Like going to the pub and having a beer with your friends, we never looked at. We never could, at least I never appreciated how fucking amazing that is to be able to unwind with my mates and have a safe space, a safe social space, and just talk shit. I couldn't express the gratitude for that, but now I can, and hopefully a lot of other people have reflected and can look at exactly like you said, what's important and how can we go forward in a way that's going to embody the ideas that we've learned throughout this time. So great answer.
That idea of
truly hope so too.
I think that's a good place to start. It's just appreciating, right? So I think that a lot of people have been doing the good thing of going, that local pub that I love is going to go under if we don't go and get some takeaway counter meals, or that local business, I'm going to shop there because that is actually supporting those people. That's always the case. Whenever you shop at the local shop, you're supporting those people who have a family and keeping it in the neighbourhood. But we haven't made that connection, as much in our heads because of the system we're set up in. And it's the same with appreciation of sport. Without an audience isn't as good as sport is just by itself. And, comedy and music and all these things require an audience. And so I hope when the artists go back, there's going to be a greater appreciation of, you know, the great luxury it is to have an audience. But I hope from the audience's point of view, there's also going to be a greater appreciation of what it is.
I want to ask you, what would be the first song in the soundtrack to your life?
It's a interesting and hard question, but I'm going to say there's one that immediately comes to mind. So fuck it, let's just go with that, right? My intro music is Back in Black by AC/DC, and it has been for, you know, a decade now, since my great mate Dave Grant died. Speaking of mentors, Dave Grant was an amazing Melbourne stand-up comedian and never really became the, you know, national and international name that he probably deserves to be, but he was a greatly admired, you know, stand-up comedian, you know, in the rooms, which is where comics earn their reputation. And, you know, there was no one better in a room. He could kill in any room, Dave Grant, and he cared about comedy. He would reset lights. He would take lights around in his boot of his car to gigs. He would put the chairs in different places. He would do everything that he could possibly do to elevate the gig itself. And I admire that. I've been watching the Last Dance, the Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls documentary. And what occurs to me the most, why we love Michael Jordan above all other basketballers, is that he had the two things that we want in sports people, which is that we want them to be ruthless about wanting to achieve success, win the game. You know, he had 6 championships and all these MVPs, and he was ruthlessly ambitious in wanting to win. But he also balanced that with playing the game at its most elevated. And that's what we want, I think, from people, is to play it hard, but sometimes in playing it hard, it actually stops the game from being enjoyable. You know, you can win great seasons of things by shutting down, you know, the way that people play games. And I think it's the same a bit with, you know, art in general as well, which is that, you know, there's people who actually think about, Dave Grant wanted to elevate the whole art form. He didn't just want to, he wanted to be the best on himself, but he wanted to adjust the chairs and the lights so that the show would be elevated as well.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to do. You want to be the best, but at all the same time, you know, elevating everybody else around you. Never try to be the best by keeping other people down. Try to raise them as high as they can be and still be better. That's the ultimate aim, right? Let everyone be at their best and then try to be inspired by how good they are to be good yourself. So anyway, when Dave died, as a tribute to him, I used to, because I could be a person that would let my mood or the gig or the audience or these sort of things affect the performance, very in tune with the everything. And I wanted to try to make every show be special and be like the best show it could be. And so I started using Dave's music just to remind me, what would Dave Grant do? And because I always knew that every time he went out, there was no small gigs, no shitty gigs. He wanted, you know, somebody might be seeing him for that only time that night. You know, it might be, you know, Dave O'Neill's gig and you're feeling absolutely shit house, but that might be the night that someone's come along to see you. And so you should at least still try to be funny. You should still try to do the best that you can do, even if the circumstances aren't ideal. And so now when I hear that song, I feel like I need to go to work. And this will be the period of time, I guess, when I eventually go back on stage. It will probably be the longest period of time in between times that I've heard Back in Black by AC/DC, particularly because I've stopped doing gigs and stopped working at Triple M. So my instances of AC have really gone down drastically.
Yeah, no, well put. I don't know. It's perfect. It's well played. My final question to you, Wil Anderson, is how do you want to be remembered?
I'm not sure that I care for being remembered. Is the honest answer. I think that I'd be comfortably forgotten. It's the weird bit in between that I think is the most awkward bit. So if I could right now walk away from, I'm not saying that I want to do this, but if you were given the option of a gradual sort of decline in people knowing who you were and liking what you do versus a complete and utter erasure. So if you came to me and said, here's your choices, your career has peaked, and gradually over the next sort of 10 to 15 years, you will glide into obscurity, but people will still kind of know who you were. Hey, didn't you used to be? Or people will immediately forget you ever existed. I would immediately forget you ever existed feels like a holiday to me. Feels like a luxury. When I lived in America, you know, the anonymity of my life there was one of the greatest joys that I had. So the idea of going away from this and being completely anonymous, absolutely. I would be fine with that, and I'd be fine not to be remembered at all. But that's not going to happen, unfortunately. You know, it's probably going to be one of those things where like some old person's still going to come up to me going, didn't you used to be on the Glass House? You know?
That'll be my mum. She went, well.
Yeah. And so then if you are going to be remembered, at least for a little while, how do you want to be remembered? Here's how I want to be remembered. I would hope to be remembered as somebody who left the industry that gave me so much better than I found it. That's my... If I could be remembered in whatever definition of that, you know, personally, whether it's just having helped support other people that you've liked, whether it's giving some space and an opportunity to someone who's gone on to make something that you enjoyed, whether it's sometimes about having blazed a path to the opportunities that people now... I mean, when I first started doing the Melbourne Comedy Festival, the idea that the top selling act at the Comedy Festival would be an Australian act was foreign to any of us, literally. Like the big international acts were the high selling acts, and then the Australians, you know, picked up the scraps underneath. Now it's the complete opposite to that. The hugest selling acts at the Comedy Festival are traditionally Australian acts, and that is because not about me specifically, but me in conjunction with a whole bunch of other people who, you know, forged that path that now is the path that is open to any young comedian, any young Australian comedian. You can be Tommy Little, or you can be, you know, whatever the next generation coming through under that, and go,
you look at
I could
YouTube
be that person.
You look at YouTube and Lewis Spears and people who are coming up big in the comedy, and I think the internet's a great space to build that up as well. You're exactly right, mate. With that, I thank you for answering my 8 questions, Wil Anderson.